as well as whole organisational approaches to promote staff and student welfare. Our speakers today include Professor Rob Smith from Birmingham City University, and Rob will consider the context in which the sector operates and question how the broader role of colleges, so starkly revealed during austerity and the pandemic, that of providing for the pastoral needs of students from the communities they serve, has sharpened the dichotomy between a local values-based orientation towards social justice and an abstract purposing related to the production of human capital in order to address national productivity levels and an associated skills gap. How can leadership in further and adult education stay human? Following that, we will welcome Jackie Galbraith, the principal of West Lothian College. And Jackie will be speaking about how West Lothian College has developed a trauma-informed culture based on the principle of leading with empathy and vision. She will speak about the Trust Project, which supports learners to access and sustain their college courses, and about the support the college gives to the community. The work Jackie will be speaking about is described in detail in the recent College Development Network report, which is available on their website. Following this, we will have Debbie Hinbust and Rachel Wadsworth, both from Nottingham College. Rachel has worked in education since undertaking her degree in psychology and educational development prior to her PGCE in 2007. She's currently Director for Student Services and the Designated Safeguarding Lead at Nottingham College, and she began her career as a tutor, predominantly teaching 16 to 19-year-olds studying health and social care. As Director of Student Services, Rachel has led the team in developing comprehensive support for all learners attending Nottingham College. And Debbie is a Fellow of the CIPD and has worked across retail, housing and further education in senior leadership roles. She is currently the Director of People and Development Services at Nottingham College. And in this role, she has been committed to launching development programmes at all levels across the college to help build leadership capability and develop a stronger, more inclusive culture where colleagues can truly thrive. If you have any questions throughout this speakers' talks, please do put them in the chat, and we hope to have time at the end to address these. So I'd like to hand over now to Rob Smith to start us off.
Thanks, Catherine. Let me just organise my sharing. Fantastic to see everyone and to see some people I know as well as people I don't know. We're grateful for the opportunity to contribute to this meeting. Provide some insights. They're probably slightly further away from the front line that the other speakers are going to give, because I have been researching further ed since '98, but in terms of my actual physically going in and out of colleges happened more up till about 2015, 16. My contacts then I've maintained a lot of contacts. Anyway, I'll carry on. I've researched with colleagues into leadership specifically, and I'm kind of proud and honoured to number some senior leaders of colleges amongst my friends. So this is the challenge we've got. So I'm going to take this quite policy, and I call it a global context, really. This is about, I've reached understandings. I started a doctorate in 98, 99. And I think at that point, I thought that some of the phenomena that I looked at in my doctoral study, I thought that policymakers didn't understand what the effects were. I think over the last 25, 30 years, I've become to understand that actually now they fully understand what's going on and regard it as kind of collateral damage. So I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with the neoliberal human capital skills policy that I'm mentioning in that top line. I think it's intensified since 2010. It was there before that. It links back to a particular school of economics. People, again, I'm sure are probably familiar with from the Chicago school, it's called, which has a version of human beings and how they operate as well at its heart, which is about self-interest basically, and doesn't recognise altruism. My view of further ed is that it is very situated within communities, but policy positions it differently. It's around employment. I think this is focused very much 16 to 19 as well. Adult skills budgets, I think, have suffered even more than general college budgets. But values-based pedagogies then, and our social justice concern, which I think motivates probably many people who are in our meeting today, and many of the people who I know who work in further ed are kind of sidelined. I want to introduce the notion of meritocracy, and it's worth looking into what that means, because I think that we have a broad feeling that, oh, meritocracy, that's okay, isn't it? But actually, the meritocratic principles, they really contribute to this, because meritocracy really, my understanding would be that it starts off that the way things are is like a natural order, because some people have more talent than others. So it really does not address some of the social inequality that I think really you need to understand what's going on in our society. And if you take that meritocratic viewpoint seriously, then you see that according to that logic, further education students are actually positioned as lacking talent and not being gifted, and somehow in some senses deserving where they are because they haven't worked hard enough or something like that. Which obviously, again, I would disagree with very strongly, because it doesn't take account of social capital and cultural capital and all those Bourdieusian concepts that many of us are familiar with. Austerity, I think, has sharpened this even further. We've had extraordinary and explosion in poverty and the mental health issues, and I have researched the mental health issues in a paper that came out recently, specifically in further education. And it actually was about further education and staff and the mental health things that they've tackled. So what does this do to leadership? Well, I just put the last point is the lessons from the Theranos debacle. If anyone's followed this, Elizabeth Holmes, I think she's called, that idea of faking it till you make it is very much a market approach to leadership. And that is really, and it's not just, it's across the board really. Market realities mean that you disguise failure until the crisis and the crash. And it's not fair on anyone. It's not fair really on your employees and staff, and also disadvantaged students. But that's what leadership in markets does. I talk about the funding accountability and performance regime and how this influences a lot of cultures. And I think there's a responsibility of, I'm going to talk about leadership and what it is. I think leadership, in the writing and research I've done, I've tried to define leadership as a mode of action and behaviour that operates throughout colleges. Inevitably, some individuals carry more of the responsibility around funding and performance, and it's difficult. But what they have to try to do is to keep those pressures, to buffer staff from those pressures so that teaching and learning doesn't suffer. Otherwise, we end up with spoon feeding and everything. This little exchange here is between me and a senior leader in a local college during the pandemic. And there was this sense that when the pandemic kind of kicked off, some of the principals in further education were sort of saying, oh, we're not going to close, we'll be the last ones to close. I heard this from other principals who felt differently about the pandemic. But then this pressure to keep going. So this emphasis on the everyday, that's a notion from Lefebvre, that idea that we're in a perpetual present which drives us, and it can prevent us from reflecting on what is actually going on and what values may be being distorted or pushed to one side. So that a fixation on assessment and measuring performance and attendance in this case here. And in this same conversation, he was saying that the mental health of staff kind of fell off the edge there, was never really considered at all, keeping an eye on time. And I think we had the same things in HE. You know, HE is not immune to this. I think we were offered kind of yoga classes and deep breathing exercises and things like that. I think that what that reveals to me is how important the everyday is as a way of, it's like a juggernaut, as a way of driving forward this same agenda. Now, I talk about a skills discourse, and that's not because I have disrespect for the importance of employment, of course, but it is a discourse that objectifies people, and it objectifies, in my view, it objectifies students as repositories of skills for UK PLC, this sort of myth, this nation that we're all supposed to hold in our head, and the productivity of the nation. But it also ends up doing the same to staff, I think, because it reduces what they do to a sort of spoon feeding exercise, when I think further education pedagogy is much more relational than that. I'm going to just flip very quickly then to another way of viewing this, which is more global. Increasingly, my perspectives on the meaning of education is that it has to embrace global perspectives because of climate crisis, but also through this notion of decolonisation. There's a fantastic writer called Achille Mbembe, who's a Cameroonian academic and philosopher, and he talks about ways of thinking, other ways of thinking. There's a view of modernity and Western modernity that really, it is founded on obliterating and excluding different ways and that cultures view our world and what it is to be a human being on this planet. And it didn't succeed in wiping them out. We need to reconnect. Post-humanism attempts the same thing, connecting back up with that. There's a fantastic article by Danawid, which is about the Grenfell Tower tragedy and the immorality of what happened. And that says that the empire, the British Empire, there are people still who get gongs, the British Empire and all the rest of it. But that empire now, although geographically it's receded, we are now the subjects, because the mechanisms and structures of establishment are still in place. It's just that it's turned inwards. And she uses the Grenfell Tower example to explore that. So an orientation of leading action then, these are big themes, I know, but it is to keep global perspectives in mind, to question what global skills means if further education is being positioned in that way. I think we all think about the local as well as the global, but to fight for that and to think about the consequences of acting in leadership within this construct of a nation. I really think we have to challenge that. I know that events in 2015 have forced us to focus on certain hypothetical constructs, ideological constructs. I think we have to try and resist those, because coming from a place like Birmingham, this city, it is the world, and it continues to draw people in from all over the world with all the richness that brings with it. So planetary leadership of some kind needs to be kept in the back of our mind to resist this reductive view. I'm trying to keep the time. I think I've come in at about 15 minutes. I can share the articles in here. I can't share the books, but there are articles in there, and I'm very happy to share any of those. If anyone wants to email me after the thing, I'll put my email in the chat.
That's great. Thank you ever so much, Rob, for starting us off today. And I'd now like to hand over to Jackie.
Thank you. I'll just try and get my screen, share my screen. As I said, I've not done it for a while. Can you see that?
Yes, I can see that.
That's great, thanks. Well, thank you for inviting me to speak today. And I must say I'm really interested to listen to Rob, because I have read many of his articles and read the book that he and Vicky Duckworth published last year. There's some of it I would disagree with, but then I'm not an academic, and it's not from an academic perspective, maybe from a practitioner's perspective. And it would be really great, Rob, to have a conversation at some point in the future just to help me understand more about that, because I think it's really interesting, and I do think colleges and what we do, certainly in Scotland, is under-researched, although Gordon's organisation is starting to make a bit of a dent in that. So this is a very different presentation. I'm not an academic, and I've never been an academic in the sense of research. I've been a lecturer in higher education, but I've not been an academic. So mine is very pragmatic, based on our experiences. So I'm just going to talk you through, my approach to leading with empathy in West Lothian College. So I'll start with just does this actually in presenter mode? Is that better now? Let me see. Or does it not work in presenter mode? Is that okay? Can people see that?
Yeah, that's
Yes.
great.
Yes.
Okay, that's great, thanks. So a little bit about West Lothian College. So I think by English terms, we would be a very small college. But in Scotland, we are regarded as one of the larger colleges by the Scottish Funding Council, who fund us. Although we are one of the smaller, larger colleges, if that makes sense, with around 10,000 students. We've got one campus, which is on the screen there, which is located in the heart of Scotland's central belt between Edinburgh and Glasgow, in an area that's gone through some major economic change over the past number of decades, from a former mining community through to the heart of Scotland's semiconductor industry, which collapsed in the 90s, and now a very different type of area. Interestingly, we're the only college in Scotland that is growing, although a lot of that is driven by the fact that the population is growing, and then the young population is growing, as well as the adult population, and that's down to where it's located. So I guess we benefit from demographic change, and I think some of the things that we do are also helping that. Very quickly, the split between FE and HE that we deliver is 81% FE, 19% HE. A wee bit different for full-time qualifications, where it's a 60-40 split. For full and part-time students, overwhelmingly our students are part-time, mostly adults, and that increases year on year. And those adults go from adults who are adult returners to adults in the workplace to young adults who have returned to education in their late 20s, early 30s. And if you look at the age there, you can see that we've got a fairly I've quite an interesting age profile, that the majority of our students are actually over 25. And if you break that down even more, a significant number of them are over 40. And as you would expect for a college of our nature, we have a wide range of courses, which I won't go into in any great detail. So I guess what I want to speak today is about our whole college approach, from being trauma informed to being trauma responsive. And I suppose I maybe should put some of this in the context of me. It's not about me, but I think my values and beliefs actually drive what I do in the college. So I had a false start at university when I left school in the early 80s. I dropped out after 6 months. I then became a statistic in the Thatcher era. And after 5 years on and off the dole, as we referred to it, I went back to college solely to get a decent job. And the career that I chose was computing, because it was a burgeoning industry at the time. So I started my career in the semiconductor industry. I left to teach computer networking at university, and then I started working in an organisation leading educational technology developments in Scotland. Spent 10 years of my life in government advising ministers directly on skills mainly skills responses to economic recession, the financial crash, etc., etc. And in summary, I've worked with colleges for 20 years, and then an additional 10 years working in them. So I didn't pursue the college sector as a career. I came into it as someone who'd worked with the college sector in a range of different contexts, including when I was a university lecturer. So it's really important, I suppose, for me to be open about this. Social justice and that experience that I've had absolutely drive what I do as a leader in the college sector. And I make no apologies for that. And certainly in the Thatcher era, I was quite troubled as a young person and starting to get into my career about not being able to live the values that I had. And I had very wise counsel from my husband, who was a social worker at the time, who basically said to me, you can live your values in your job. And if you become a manager, you can live your values as a manager. And that's what I hope that I do. So let's talk a little bit about our trauma-informed journey in the college over the past 5 years. It's not all about trauma, but poverty, about communities, about social justice. So in August 2018, we introduced free lunch for all of our students, no means testing. And that came through feedback from lecturers and the Student Association, who were telling us that students were falling asleep in classes or not able to concentrate in classes because they hadn't eaten that day. So that was pretty straightforward to me. Had to push against my finance vice principal about how we cover the cost of that, but we've done that since then, and the board was completely on board with that. Just a few months later, we committed to becoming an ACES, Adverse Childhood Experiences Aware College, trauma-informed and mentally healthy college. And we introduced the concept of college lifetime ambassadors, which was somebody who didn't work for the college, but who spent time working with us to support our students. So the first ambassador was the founder of a local charity set up because her son had taken his life by suicide, and she was there to support other young people. And she has spent 5 years on campus regularly supporting our students. The following February, we had speakers with lived experience of ACEs, trauma and poverty, including a former armed robber who was now working with young people, speak to our staff conference about their lives and how their lives turned out in relation to trauma. And at that conference, we committed to becoming truly trauma informed and worked with local partners and where we were going with that. And throughout the period, we introduced training for staff, raising awareness.
I'm in Friday, I am, because I had Monday was my 0.8 day.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, somebody. Okay, sorry about that. I think I just stopped because I thought I heard somebody speaking there. So I'm not going to go through all these points, but it kind of shows you the journey that we're on. So part of that's about addressing poverty, part of it's addressing trauma, and part of it's addressing things like addiction and so on. But these are so interlinked. Critical in this journey was the establishment of the Trust Project in August 2021. For a very small number of students, you know, in the scheme of things, but for students, for young people who had no other option because of some of the things that Rob talked about earlier, actually, about reductions in community organisations and so on. So we started this Trust Project, which I'll talk about just now, actually. So we got some funding from our funders for 2 years to establish this project. It was to help young people back into education, especially young people who had had significant problems with addiction, poverty, and also around the criminal justice system. So many of those young people we work with are in and out of the young offenders institutions, and we're supporting them, trying to get them on a positive pathway. It provides a personalised education pathway for every young person, so it's intensive. There are a small team of 4 or 5 people who work intensively with each individual and follow them through their journey. It's a stepping stone for young offenders, and we're now extending that to be a wraparound support for some students in our mainstream courses. So again, I'm not going to go through all of that, but the key thing here is about how we work with the young people, their families or their carers, because many are care experienced, and with our staff and our partners. We couldn't do this without the partners where we are. And I think the most important point, I suppose, I would mention on that screen is porous boundaries, that our partners are part of the college, that we, you know, I gave up our executive suite, which was offices for myself and the vice principals, to convert it into a soft landing partnership space for these young people and partners. And just, it's a much better use of college space, and it's a fantastic space where the young people are. So who are we supporting? This year we've got 59 young people supported fully by the Trust team. And if you look at the profile of these young people, 47% live in our poorest communities, 56% are care experience, 49% have a mental health condition, 69% have got a specific learning difficulty, 20% are young carers. So just layer upon layer of challenge for these young people, which is why it's so important to give them dedicated support. We've also got 75 students who are on full-time courses. across the college that we've identified could benefit from trust project support. And again, if you look at their profile, a very similar, although not quite as stark as the young people who are dedicated or full-time on the trust project. And those young people, I think there's something like a 67% success rate of those young people going on to full qualifications at the college or other qualifications at the college, a small number of them going into work. So for that very, very challenged group of young people, quite a good response there. How do we know we're making progress? And I haven't talked so much about staff here. I'm really interested in Rob's comments about the pandemic and staff, and I'd love to have a conversation about that. Maybe we'll have some questions about that, but I don't have time to go into that. But we know we're making progress because the response rates from our staff surveys and our student surveys are extremely high, and the levels of satisfaction or endorsement about what we're doing are also extremely high. And we do that regularly, and we also have regular other ways of dealing with that. Our external assessments, which I use not to get badges. I'm not interested in Investor People's badge. I'm interested in the methodology that uses in conversations and interviews with staff to find out how we can make work better for staff, and from our quality assurance organisation to find out how we can make learning better for our students. We have a rich number of testimonies from partners, and of course Gordon's organisation have conducted research. And this is really me going on to the last slide here. I mean, the key thing is about how do we maintain that college culture. One of our strategic objectives is to lead with vision and empathy, and staff help define our strategic objectives, and they're really straightforward: support individuals, support communities, and support the local economy, but do all of that leading with vision and empathy. The vision part gives staff the autonomy and the go-ahead to be innovative, to try new things, to be creative. The empathy is about put yourself in people's shoes, understand where people are coming from. And we've got increasing evidence of staff and teams adopting a trauma-informed approach, from lecturers and assessors right through to janitorial, cleaning and catering staff, right through to information systems colleagues whose mantra is data without empathy is useless, and who by using our data and are actually helping target resources to a wider group of students across the college. Many colleagues are using college resources to deliver to communities voluntarily in their own time. So lecturers are bringing in, they're managing to persuade other lecturers to support, for example, the Little Acorns is a group of dads who have fostered young people and who are struggling to build relationships with them. Now, these young people have had enormous trauma in their lives. So they're brought into the college 2 nights a week for 6 weeks, and they get a chance to try out things in the different workshops, the kitchens, the hair salons, etc. And it really helps to develop the community. All the lecturers involved do that in their own time. They came up with the idea, they're delivering it, they use our resources, that's absolutely fine, but they don't get paid for it because it's their idea, they've come up with it. So there's a number of other things there, I won't talk through them in detail. Importantly, our students are also embracing this leading with empathy. So it was last year, a group of health and social care students organised a fantastic event, a full-day community event on campus for 50 Ukrainian orphans who come over from Dnipro and their house mothers, their carers, and who've clearly suffered a significant trauma and had a wonderful day benefiting from the college and its partners. The important thing to leave you with is that culture needs ongoing nourishment to thrive. And my expectations of managers, of myself, is we have to live these values and this goal in practice. And that does take ongoing nourishment. So for example, I know we've got somebody with an HR background here. We've taken all of our managers through growth mindset training and how we can have psychological safety in the college so that people don't feel frightened to suggest new ideas. I would really love to spend more time talking about some of the things that Rob raised. We were a college actually that went against the grain in Scotland and had 60% of our FE students on campus right throughout the pandemic, except when there were lockdowns. And that was a demand that came from our staff and our students. And it also enabled us to tackle poverty for students who couldn't eat and weren't eating, and also of staff and students who were struggling from mental health. So I don't think it's a straightforward picture about the pandemic and why people came on campus or didn't. We were against the grain in Scotland. Most colleges had 10%. of their students on campus throughout the pandemic. So I mean, I'm happy to get into that in any more detail to help understand why we did that, but it wasn't done for a performance reason. It absolutely wasn't done for that. It was done to help people be safe and to be well, and actually to be supported. So thank you for that. Please connect with me on LinkedIn, Twitter, or whatever way if there's anything more you want to ask, and I really hope I haven't abused your
Thank you so much, Jackie, for that really interesting presentation. And so I'd like to hand over now to our final speakers today, Debbie Hinbist and Rachel Wadsworth from Nottingham College.
Good afternoon. Just give me a second.
Hello.
And we'll be sharing. She says quite confidently.
Just waiting for that front slide.
I know, I'm really sorry. We've got a bit of a slow approach going on. It closed itself down. Right, let's go again and see if I can get that up.
Perfect. There we go.
Oh, can you see that? Right, let's roll
Yeah,
from the
we just
beginning then.
need to-
Excellent.
Yes, so I'm
great.
Debbie Hinbest, and I'm the Director of People Services at Nottingham College, and I'm here with Rachel, who's the Director of Student Services, and we're going to talk to you a bit about the college journey and the challenges we had and the kind of approach we're taking now to our learners, but also then to talk a little bit about our culture and what we're doing with our leaders. So on that note, I will hand over to Rachel.
Thanks, Debbie, and you've explained the first slide quite nicely, so I can jump through that and get into the real stuff. So I would like to start with just a little bit of background, really, and talk you through where we were and where we are today. So as you can see, the college has had a long history in providing education and training for people across Nottingham. But significantly, by 2012, there were two main colleges in Nottingham. And then the Nottingham College we are now today is the result of those two colleges merging in 2017. And that's really where our journey begins today and what we want to focus on from 2017 onwards. So, as I say, 2017, it saw the start of one college for Nottingham, and it was a significant change for both staff and students in multiple ways, really. Quite naturally, there were two colleges and they'd had a healthy competition for one another with different priorities, ways of working and delivery models. And for the students, their perceived choices had been reduced. And for the larger community, employers and stakeholders, many actually struggled with the concept of one college. The result of the merger in the initial stages meant a great deal of change and upheaval. And with that, in its practical working and culturally, with a new leadership team. And the focus for the college at this time, and it was at the time then, was to establish the college's new identity and manage the finances and estate. And that resulted in a few things: a new build, realigning of staff and structure, alongside the reduction in some of our college's wider estate. And I think it was the pace of change that had a negative impact on how valued staff felt and on their view of the college and the leadership strategies that were being put in place. Also, shortly after merger, we also experienced strike action, which compounded the issues. And similarly, we saw change with the pandemic. And while some people found that really, really difficult, the pandemic, although it was testing in those early days, provided us as a college with a common purpose. So from the uncertainty and disarray of merger came teams that were pulling together to ensure all of our students could still access education and training. You know, we flipped our learning, and the whole of the college organisation came together to train each other on Teams and to be able to deliver online. Our staff were out personally delivering resources and laptops to students, and our vulnerable staff that were at home. And we saw the beginning of wellbeing groups, really, for both staff and students, which has continued and grown. So that was although it was a horrific time in lots of ways, it was actually the beginning of some positive stages for us as a new college. Post-pandemic saw the students return to the new build, and the focus over the last 2 years has been on the teaching and learning and the student experience. And really our biggest turnaround is moving from requires improvement to good in that time. The realisation is that as a college we have a sense of responsibility to not only understand our community but to build resilient students and employees that will be future ready. And this means raising aspirations across the board, providing higher quality education and training, and focusing on people's health and well-being. So where are we? And that brings us into sort of like our part 2 phase really. So we are Nottingham's college. We understand we've got a responsibility to respond to the needs of Nottingham, and to do that we need to be aware of our community. So we just thought it would be a good idea to give you a little bit of a background of Nottingham and what we're doing with and for them. So Nottingham's an incredibly vibrant city, and its ambitions as a core city to be a significant economic player nationally and globally, you know, as a role as an educator and skills provider and large employer as well. And it's to support the city's ambitions. And our focus, however, must be equally placed on supporting the city to overcome some of its key challenges. And it is a city with some large key challenges. So Nottingham in itself is the 11th most deprived local authority area in the UK. More than half of the city's population live in wards within the bottom 20% nationally when it comes to deprivation. The life expectancy for both male and females is lower in Nottingham, and the healthy life expectancy again is shorter than their live life expectancy. We've got quite high rates of suicide rates in the city, and they are generally higher than the national average. Unfortunately, you're more likely to suffer with substance abuse problem in the city, and referral for mental health support in Nottingham is rising rapidly, and recently published research report is a good indicator that there is a growing recognition of the need to address significant mental health disparities for our LGBT+ communities. So as a city, what are they doing? Well, Nottingham City Council and Nottingham County Council, who both partner with us, has an integrated health and wellbeing strategy, and you'll see by the diagram it indicates quite nicely whether the interconnectivity between all the factors affecting health and wellbeing are. As a college, it's particularly pertinent to us as we go through the array of issues is education, living working conditions, the work environment and employment. And it's this that's influenced our leadership, vision and direction, really, our partnerships and discussions that we're having with the city and the wider community. I thought it'd be interesting just to give you a bit of a highlight of where our young people are in the city. So nearly 17,000 children in Nottingham live in low income families, and that's more than 1 in 4. More than 50% of our student population live in Nottingham City, and the majority of them are from our most deprived wards, being the blue tinged areas. With our students that are with us, we've got more than 8,000 of our students receiving student financial support. And when we talk in terms of safeguarding incidents and referrals, for the last academic year, there were just under 2,000 incidents raised, of which 424 related to mental health, self-harm and suicidal ideation. So as you can see, our starting position is what can we do to be able to really empathise with our young people and our students and our teams to be able to move this forward and make stronger links. So as with every other college, we have 3 critical roles. We need to be able to offer broad ranges of courses. We need to be able to support economic prosperity and to play a part in enhancing social mobility. So how are we doing that? What is our current approach? Well, we've taken on board where we were when we merged in 2017, And we've changed our focus completely from buildings and finance to people and learning. We've invested considerably into our teaching and learning. We've taken a whole new approach with TLA, and it's all about developmental measures for our staff. There's been dedicated teams of advanced practitioners that support teachers with best practice, and recognised commitment across the teams of the real investments in resources and time into staff development. We've got what are the challenges of Nottingham College, and what are we doing about it? So we're facing the challenges of being Nottingham's college. We're taking responsibility to ensure we provide opportunity for all our prospective students, appropriate courses, building resilience and skills, linking in with external partners and stakeholders to support the needs of the city. How will we ensure we're going to stay on track and achieve this? Well, we've obviously developed in the last 2 years a new corporate strategy. Well, that's actually in the last academic year, and we're working really hard to involve the whole organisation, so every employee within Nottingham College has taken part in this and contributed. When we focus on students, because that's why we're here at the end of the day, we're trying to make one choice for as many learners as possible, so we are the one choice. We're working on different approaches to keeping our learners and students in college. Now, it's not just about the courses we offer or the times and availability, but it's about that for us, it's about that wraparound support, and how are we going to ensure that our students overcome some of the difficulties that they face just by living in Nottingham itself. So we have wellbeing mentors, we have pastoral tutors, we support with food and travel, but we try and go that extra mile. So we've provided winter breakfast for all of our 16 to 19 students, not just those that are in receipt of free meals. We do the same over the exam periods to ensure that they get the best possible chance of going into that exam hydrated and fed. We're engaging them with social projects. We're trying to encourage them to give back to the community. In terms of a student-centred approach, it's to do the right thing. It's customer service. Yes, we're education, but it's still a service, isn't it? It's about us being there and doing the right thing for them as many times as possible. And we also have focused on the fact that some of our young people and our mature students are not actually in a place to take on a full qualification at the moment. They've got lots and lots of things going on outside the classroom. So we've developed the Prince's Trust, which starts for this academic year, for those students where they just need that stepping stone back into something to be able to build their own resilience and to feel their own worth. We've got varying levels of foundation learning, which is qualifications and non-college certificates. And we try to do as many things as we can to bring all of those students together and bring them back into the community, the college community. So we're offering blended learning. Obviously, we're trying to digitally enable everybody, but I suppose our key focus alongside their education and employment skills is their well-being, and it's about focusing on the students and our colleagues to be able to look after each and everybody's well-being. At that point, I'm going to hand over to Debbie, who is going to talk about our strategic priorities.
In about 60 seconds.
I'm really sorry. I'm terrible for talking. I'm really
It's absolutely fine. If you'll forgive me, I'll take just a couple of minutes, because if you want to move on the next slide and the next one. So really, we've worked really hard at focusing heavily on our colleagues as well over the last 2-3 years. So coming out of the pandemic, I think, as Rachel said, there's been a real sharp focus and a real attention into our culture, our colleagues, and we know if we invest in our colleagues, they'll absolutely do the right thing and invest in our students. So we've really had a strong focus on that. People strategy went through last year, and we know that our colleagues are telling us, we want you to invest in us, we want to be developed, and we want time and we do want our well-being looked after, which I think every organisation up and down the country has focused on as well. So if we move on to the next slide, we've tried to look at it in a more holistic way. This is the work of Deborah Corey, really, and she calls it that engagement bridge. So we don't just look at well-being as about the, you know, the helpline that you can get hold of. We are talking about the whole thing. So we do talk about well-being around leadership, management, purpose, vision and values, communication, pay and benefits, which we have huge challenges with, but we have been able to invest in pay heavily in the last 12 to 18 months. But it's also about workload and job roles and job design. So we're not just taking it as a one-off thing around, you know, EAP helplines. This is about looking at the whole. It's a big piece of work that we're starting to do. And we are literally just starting on a transformational piece within the college where everyone's been involved in that and around shaping the work and the job roles and making sure actually we've got the right job roles at the front line. So I think at the time when we were looking at our finances, some of those roles got taken out of the front line. We're absolutely looking at putting that back in. And Rachel's talked about, we've got a 200 strong workforce in supporting our students. That's been a heavy investment over the last 18 months around wellbeing, those wellbeing coaches that we have out there. But leadership is absolutely key, because leadership are the people that make the difference day to day for our colleagues. So if you can just move on, please. Thank you. Yeah. So again, we've had our ELT on development personalised to them as a team. The whole college management team have been on a programme now. We're just coming up to our second year of that. We've developed 70, 80 of our leaders, because we've got a 1,500 strong workforce. So our middle leaders have gone through a programme as well. We've got leadership competencies that we've developed together with our leaders, and that talks about being an inclusive leader. That's all about, again, valuing your colleagues so that we can get the best out of the workplace for our colleagues. We've got coaching, we've got action learning sets, lots of wraparound again for our leaders as we go through this developmental journey. We've done a lot around engaging teams and our colleagues, and it is about our leaders creating that culture day to day on the ground where they are noticing things with their colleagues and bringing them to the fore, so we can be in the preventative space rather than the reactive space. One more slide and I will stop then, because you'll have these slides. So the real shift has been in our focus on a culture that we want in the college. So we have a number of wellbeing cafes. I need to say about those, because that's been a massive piece of work where we're connecting colleagues across the college. So we have cafe network groups for bereavement, disability, wellbeing, inclusion, menopause, new parents, and the menopause particularly we have achieved an award for that in terms of the work that we do around that. But the big one has been around bereavement. Actually, in that book that came out of the pandemic times where people were suffering bereavement and struggling with it, and that was one of the second, third cafes that came online, really, where we connect colleagues across the college. We also do the mental health first aids, but we have 8 CPD days a year, and we always have something about mental health and resilience and positive mental attitude. We weave it in, so it's not just a once and done. This is a continual message, a continual, constant communication around this and looking after yourself as well. So I will stop there because I'm conscious there might be a few questions, but there's a lot that we do to ensure that we're listening and responding to our colleagues, because we know they are just absolutely critical to the success of the college, really, and our learners. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Those have been 4 really interesting contributions there on this topic for this new series of Leading with Empathy. If anyone's got any questions that they would like to ask, then please do put them in the chat or raise your hand. I know Christina and Kevin have been monitoring the chats. If there's anything that they would like to raise that's come up so far. This screen is still being shared at the moment. If you wanted to unstop sharing, that would be great. Brilliant, thank you. So Christina and Kevin, I'll hand over to you. Have you got any comments that you've been monitoring in the chat that you want to bring to our attention?
Well, Christina, do you want to refer back to a couple of the comments you've made, please? about recognition?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of my favourite words have been coming up in all three presentations, really, around recognition, collaboration, partnership, leading with values. And I think for me that there's just been three presentations that have really spoke to each other in lots of ways. And I think that the context that Rob set up there, what I'm really interested in is, Rob, you talked about this this idea that accountability kind of distracts us from the core job of what an FE college might be doing. And that maybe FE's positioning of policy is actually out of step with what colleges actually need to be doing in terms of facing the challenges that their communities face. And then we've had two presentations from college leaders where they're actually really looking back at that local context and really taking into account the needs of the community around them. And part of me was thinking, well, if all of this policy churn is just background noise and it's just white noise, I think I referred to it as white noise in my thesis, actually. It's all just kind of there in the background. And what if we just did what we wanted to do anyway? What if we just led with our values? What would happen then? And I guess my question to Debbie and to Jackie and to Rachel is it that easy? Or do you face lots of challenges in trying to lead the way you're trying to lead?
I suppose it can be challenging, but in an FE college, I suppose it's about balance, isn't it? So it can be challenging because we've invested, as Debbie said, quite heavily in wellbeing and wraparound support, but that's at a cost. And, finances, are finite. So it's we have that instead of what. So it's those kinds of challenges. But I think it all depends, from my perspective, I feel it all depends on your leadership team and how committed they are to getting behind the community that you're serving, really, because that's what we're doing at the end of the day. So we're very fortunate over the last 2 years that we've really leapt forward, and our leadership team, from exec to our college management teams, are all more or less aligned in where we want to go. So it's been slightly easier, I would say, Debbie, than it has been. I've been with Nottingham College a considerable amount of years. So it's a very different feel. The college is a very different feel at the moment, and it's a real positive. So,
and I think we've had real positivity about the investment in leadership development. And again, there's been some real challenges with some of that, but ultimately people have, I would say, in the main, really embraced that and, felt that time invested in them. There's more to do, and I know that colleagues more widely, we do invest heavily. We do invest in their training and their further research, etc. But there is more to do on a day-to-day. And again, we've got some exciting stuff coming down the line in the next month, really, where colleagues will start to feel, hopefully, that level of investment in them as well as it continues.
Did you want to come in there?
I think Jackie did, yeah.
Yeah, I think it is hard. Obviously, it's hard. I've just persuaded our board to go with a planned deficit budget for a couple of years, because I don't want us to be laying people off, because we need the people we have in the college to deliver what we need to do, and the board has gone along with that, which I'm really pleased with. But I suppose for me, it's easy for me to say this. I'm just a few years away from retirement. Anyway, I'm just a few years away from retirement, so I'm in a bit of a mission. So I'm kind of ignoring some of the challenges that are in my way and just pushing forward. And I think the critical thing is, if you do a good job with your students and staff, people will come along with you. So the local authority, all the partners, we're now using each other's resources in a way that we shouldn't have to, because if there was more money in the system, people would still be able to do what they did before. But that's just not the world that we're in. So we're now working with local mental health counsellors, who are contributing their resources to supporting our students and our staff. And all sorts of things are going on. Really, really interesting things are going on with community learning and development, with the local youth justice teams, etc., etc. And I think we've just gone on with it. And as far as the funders are concerned, Well, actually what we're seeing is, you know, for me, the key thing is that people get a positive experience, but we're seeing improvements in student success going against the trend. And that's because of that human thing that we do. So as long as they're seeing that, they're staying away from me. My challenge would be to try and persuade more of my peers in Scotland. And I mean, colleges do a brilliant job across Scotland, don't get me wrong, but I think there's maybe, we spend too much time complaining about the lack of money and jumping up and down about it. I don't have the energy for that, to be honest. I just want to go on and do what I can do with the resources that I've got. And that's not easy, but you know what, that's what I'm there for and that's what I get paid for. So that's what I'm going to do.
That's wonderful. Peter.
Do you want to go?
Yes. Actually, Jackie sort of almost sort of answered that question. My question, actually, of the last few comments. First of all, thank you so much to all of the presenters. I don't think I've been in a more uplifting meeting for ages. It's been really, really positive. And I suppose my question would be, how do we take all of this good practice and share it across the sector? Because the word that came to mind when I was listening to especially FE colleagues talking was bravery, because it does take a lot to say we, you know, at the moment we're not focusing on metrics, not focusing on retention, we're focusing on the person. And so I wonder whether that would go down well with all the sector. And I just wanted to know how you think we should spread this practice. And I think Jackie sort of started to answer it actually in her last point.
Okay, great, thank you. There was one, I think we've got time for there's one question in the chat that I can see here.
Yeah.
And that said, I wonder what the speakers think about how far the goal of improving the well-being of students and staff is in harmony or is in tension with the goals of developing employability skills and so on. Does anyone want to come in on that one?
Jackie, I think, yeah.
Yeah.
Did you want to speak to that, Jackie?
Yeah, I don't think they have to be in competition, because ultimately, for all the people, I mean, the first thing I did when I joined the college, I went around all the local communities, into the community centres, into partnership centres, health centres, etc., to find out about the area, because I don't live in the area. I live in another part of Scotland. It's across the road. And actually, in terms of poverty, most people see a route out of poverty as being work, decent work. So I don't think there's a conflict. It's about how you blend the two. And you know, I don't have an issue with skills and all the rest of it, because that's what people need and what they want. Whether we're working with these 16-year-olds that have been in and out of youth detention centres, they want to get on a pathway ultimately where they can earn some money and hold down some kind of rent and stuff like that. So I just think you have to be creative about making sure you do both, because and even us as individuals, I mean, I was really interested to hear what Debbie and Rachel said about Nottingham, and I'd love to hear more actually about the investment in your staff, because that really helps with our staff. Skills for staff are important to manage in this changing world that we're in, and that's very stressful for a lot of people. So skills is critical, and as well as the well-being, to get people through that. So I don't think there has to be a conflict, but I can see obviously why there is one, but we need to try and find a way through that.
And to me, it was a bit from all three of you, that sort of desire, the values-driven desire to do the right thing, even in a performative culture that Rob's talked about historically and currently, about you living with getting your governing body to accept a deficit budget, which, you know, is a real challenge to them. And then you've got the Ofsted agenda that you've come through in Nottingham, and you've had to obviously improve on there, but you're all striving to do the right thing. And I'm really reposing Peter's question, which is, how do you get that mindset owned by more people? And that's what came across to me, that porous boundaries, trauma-informed practice, you know, turning colleges round and focusing on what Sally was talking about, that massive well-being agenda for students and for staff. There's so many things to balance. I just think it's hard for the sector to respond in the way you have and are trying to individually. I'm full of admiration, but the rolling out will take a lot of bravery across the whole country, both countries. and I don't know if it's there. Sorry, Rachel, did you want to come in briefly?
Yeah, I was just very briefly. I think it's a little bit short-sighted if the sector don't know really, because if you can strengthen well-being, you will 100% strengthen retainment and achievement, and success will follow. Because if they don't feel supported, they're not going to achieve anyway, are they? So I think it's hand in hand. I think you just have to breathe it and think, well, for me to succeed, I need somebody to give me a hand. Well, that's just well-being, isn't it? Support.
Yes, brilliant. Thank you.
When Jackie, did you want to come in with
Jackie,
and Gordon?
Yeah, listen, I'm really sorry, because I'd love to. I mean, I just think that's a really interesting conversation, and I would really like to spend time talking with Rob, because I just wonder how many voices are articulated in the research. And I know that the book that you and Vicky wrote, actually there were some college leaders in that against the norm. But I think we have to have these conversations. I'm all over performance indicators for our college, absolutely all over it. And the reason why I'm all over it is because it's about students. Yeah. And I'm not all over it because I want to get a brownie points from their funders. I don't want to show off about it. You know, we've just had our performance indicators in Scotland published. Our college is amongst the highest in the sector. I'm not going to go out there and brag about that, because actually we're still on an improvement journey. For me, it's about students and the individual. Yeah. Now, not all individuals will succeed in the same way, but performance indicators should be used by lecturers and support staff and me and other staff to make sure that the student experience is the best it can be. And let's face it, I've been a lecturer. I know sometimes that there's things you can improve on as a lecturer and a support worker. So I don't believe performance indicators should have to be that tool. I just think we can be creative about how we use them and do it differently. Unfortunately, I think we get sucked into the, just the requirements of these people who, whose lives seem to be about measuring all of that stuff. But I use them. I think we do use them in a fairly positive way in the college, and get very little kickback from staff and for using them that way.
And Chair, if I just wanted one final thing, I'd say thank you to you, Jackie, for that. But finishing off perhaps with Gordon, whose conversation with me led to this event, and thank you for the inspiration, Gordon. But your hand's up, so you're the final speaker.
Oh gosh, the pressure. Kevin, thanks. I was really just going to briefly expand on something I put in the chat, which is picking up on your point and the narrative about how do we kind of propagate this and how do we get people to be brave. My organisation, College Development Network in Scotland, isn't there to kind of, we can't help people be brave on their own, but I think that the big thing that we're there to do is to talk about this and to shine a light on the practice, and that's why we've published the reports that highlight what Jackie and her colleagues are doing, and also what other colleges in Scotland are doing in different ways to support this area and to develop enhancement programs that will help us to propagate that practice across the sector. So I think the key message for me is we need to shine a light on it, we need to talk about it, we need to highlight it, not from CDN's point of view, from a policy point of view. That's not our role. Our role is to encourage practice and the spread of good practice. And Jackie's talked very eloquently, and others have, about how people run their colleges. That's what they're there to do. We're the people with the capacity to reflect on what they're doing, think about it, and tell people about it. So Jackie doesn't need to talk about how well the college is doing, because we'll do that for her, and actually reflect on why, and all our colleges. That's what we're here for. So I think there's something about the role of our kind of organisation, and obviously you have equivalent organisations in other parts of the UK. And we're not a big team. My research team, there are 3 of us in my little team, and we try and sort of punch above our weight. But for me, it's really great to have heard all the contributions today, and I think it bears out what we've been doing within CDN, which is saying we need to talk about this, and we need to talk about it in a way that people can understand, and centre it on the impact on the learner, and the fact that what we're doing is for the learner, and everything else, as Jackie said, is kind of in the background. Really, we need to drive forward that, because that's what will get us to the end point, which is supporting the learner. So it's been really grateful to all the speakers today for the inspiration, and it's something that drives what me and my colleagues, all of whom are in the room, actually do day to day, which is that action research is the best way of putting it, to actually look at what works, why, and how do we get other people doing it.
Great. So I think that's a great point to end on. I'd like to say thank you